What's going on, Cylinder Radio listeners? If you're interested in the nuance of dialogue and things like that, check out my freebie download, Debate to Dialogue, How to Have Productive Conversations About Politics and Religion. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher in Los Angeles, looking to bring viewpoint diversity to the common culture. And today I have Leah Scott. She is a student and a youth advocate who went through a transition process in some way, not transition like a lot of the transitions that I've had on this podcast, but different kind of transition. And the topic for today is going to be being red pilled, getting red pilled. And by that, I just want to give a preface. It's not, red pill is not the idea of becoming Republican or the idea of going from Democrat to Republican or something along those lines. Like Democrats are in the clouds and Republicans don't understand the truth. I don't think that's accurate. I'm going more from the side of the Matrix, the movie, where red pill is the idea that it's reality. And kind of when your head is in the clouds and you're kind of shielded from what is actually true, that would be, the blue pill. So Leah, welcome. It's so nice to see you. We've been trying to get this podcast done for literally months, and I was sick and you were sick and all kinds of crazy things. So we're finally here to do this, and I appreciate you giving me your time. And I would love to just hear your story, especially being a young person. How old are you?
19.
19. Okay, perfect. So, it's kind of like the age I teach. I teach juniors and seniors in high school. And tell us your story about how you changed your perspectives and what that was like for you.
hmm So first, I grew up in a really liberal city. Seattle, Washington is one of the most liberal cities in the country. So I kind of grew up in this like really big liberal bubble where the only ideas I heard were just the same ones over and over again. And so I went through a K through 8 school and I went there for 9 years. So I heard the same ideas from the same people for 9 years, and I kind of got stuck in that kind of bubble. Fast forward to high school, I chose to go to a predominantly white high school just for the fact that my older brothers, had experienced some racism and just unfair treatment there. And for me, it was about kind of changing that space and that culture to, better fit the narrative for just a better school.
Okay.
And for me, I kind of wanted to like change the culture, and I was a really, really radical person. So I came in, I immediately found the Black Student Union. I was like, again, stuck in another echo chamber where I had people who looked like me, talk like me, did the same little lingo as me. So I was really stuck in that really same space again. And I kind of found myself just not really thinking for myself or not really thinking independently. And in my sophomore year, it's when I met my teacher, Tola, who's now my mentor and I've known for so long.
That's who connected us. Yeah.
Yeah, he's an amazing person. And kind of what makes him just like really helpful for my own pathway was that he really helped me recognize like, okay, you want to have a goal of helping marginalized communities, specifically in this school, but you're not really doing that. Matter of fact, you're doing the opposite. And so he had a lot of these conversations with me where I would end up crying because I was so sad that with the work I was doing and I was so passionate about, I was doing absolutely nothing to help marginalized communities. And so with that transition, I kind of realized like, okay, this isn't doing anything. This isn't doing anything. And I tried to express that kind of concern, particularly in the Black Student Union. And being in a predominantly liberal area, spouting some not liberal stuff, it made me kind of ostracized from the community that I seek to help. And that's kind of a common theme throughout my educational pathway and the groups that I've been in, from NAACP Youth Council, where I had, youth from predominantly black schools, with even more liberal concentration there. It was just really difficult to kind of voice my own opinion without being called an Oreo, a Black woman with white supremacy roots. The list really unfortunately goes on, but it was something that I had to navigate, and it was really difficult, especially as a 17-year-old. So as of right now, I am a bit right-leaning, but I see both sides, and personally, I think that both sides are very great.
Yeah. And very terrible, right? I mean, like
At the same time,
good and
yes.
bad, right? Yeah, well, you're in the right place. I'm with you. Can you go into some of the detail? Like that moment is so fascinating to me when you start to go through that, and I've done it too. And I think most people who are clear thinkers and not in one ideological camp or the other, you start tumbling a little bit. It's very disruptive and totally, yeah. I mean, you need a great educator, whether it's a formal teacher like him or anybody to get you to think. That's our job, is to get you to actually think. So you said you started bringing up certain things that weren't very popular. Can you go into like what kind of things were brought up that you would categorize as not very popular with like the Black Student Union?
Yes. I think I want to fast forward to the NAACP Youth Council because I have a
Yeah,
more relevant example.
sure.
For the NAACP Youth Council, we had very, very heavy demands for the school district, which in reality, I don't think youth really have the say to do that. The things that we were doing, we were saying fire the superintendent of Seattle Public Schools, which I don't think that we have the power to do that or the leverage. But for me, when we were talking about voting for, the firing of Seattle Public Schools current superintendent during 2020, which was the height of pandemic, I said during my argument that, hey, this is in the middle of an unprecedented times. Do we really benefit from stabilizing the district and having somebody new in trying to learn the ropes when we need some stable leadership to really make sure our youth succeed and are cared for? There was a lot of different experiences with the superintendent. A lot of people called her racist, but that was kind of attributed to the results that we see in the system. Seattle Public Schools has number fifth, yeah, top 5 in achievement gap between Black and white students. So that was a statistic that was around before she was even superintendent of Seattle
Yeah.
Public Schools. So attributing the statistics of something that is systemic and longstanding to somebody who was just in the position doesn't really make sense to me. But that was kind of what I had to go through, and we had a vote, and it was like 29-1, and I was the one who refused. Along that way, what I mentioned earlier, I was called an Oreo within that. I voiced my concern of voting and being the only one who voted no in a documentary about MLK Day and standing your ground and being able to voice your opinion effectively. And that is when people claimed that they were hurt and they were crying because I asked for data on the racial experiences and how data can attribute to wanting to fire. Sorry, this is so funny to me because I still remember the girl crying and when I asked her for data, and it just really makes me laugh. But it's those type of experiences that really make me like see how in liberal spaces we allow so much misinformation, but also some like lack of critical thinking skills is really elevated. And that makes me really sad, especially for the youth that are trying to lead and trying to, help marginalized communities, when in turn they really could end up hurting them by removing somebody who is so essential to the school district.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such a like a Thomas Sowell thing. I have his a shirt of his that says something along the lines of it just has his picture and it says show me the evidence. Like he talks about how he's not interested in racism, he's interested in discrimination, because
Mm-hmm.
racism is just what someone thinks, but discrimination is in actions and that's measurable. And he's such a you're familiar with Dr. Thomas Sowell at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's such a data nerd. So he's just interested in the data, like that's his thing. He's interested in the data. So when you're trying to work out problems, solve problems, which it sounds like that's why you got into this, is to
Mm-hmm.
solve problems. Like the achievement gap is very real. And you either have to go, well, so why is it that Black and brown kids are underachieving compared to white and Asian kids? And you can say like, well, because what are you going to say? Like that they're just not built to be intelligent. Like that's no, I mean, that's like the definition of racism. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
think that. So what is it? It's got to be something else. It's got to be something in the system. It's got to be something in the culture. It's got to be something in all of these different things to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's figure it out. Let's leave no stone unturned because this is too important. And then the way to do that is through collection of data. But the people, when they start crying, I mean, I kind of get it, because it's so feeling based. And we're in the system now, we're in this society now, especially in the education system, where it's like how you feel supersedes what is. How you are who you say you are. Your feelings are valid. And I get it. And I understand that, because for so long, I think for generations, it was like, ignore people's feelings, and though your feelings don't matter, and man up and all that kind of stuff. And we've just almost like overcorrected to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So this was in high school. How old were you when this kind of started happening, where you started pushing back? And then you said you were called names. Like, can you tap into your feelings of like how that made you feel? And did you say like, ooh, I know if I keep going down this road, it's going to ostracize me from my community, especially like in a white school, like the Black community might have been very small, and maybe you'd be ostracized by definition, is like you're on the outs, like you're not a part of them anymore. And when you're a teenager, I'd say this to my students all the time, Leah, is like, when you're a teenager, your social connections are probably the most important connections you have in your life. That whole like, well, if Cindy jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? It's like, yeah, probably, mom. And I probably should, because that's how important my friends are to me. So there had to have been something in you that was like, oh, is this worth it? Can you bring me in a little bit to like what your thoughts were as you were kind of developing, and did you weigh it out? Like, should I go down this road? Should I continue, even though it might hurt me socially?
Yeah, I think whenever I talk in like an academic setting or a social setting, it also always comes with some type of social cost. And it's something that's just completely unavoidable. And it's something that I've kind of learned to at least somewhat come to terms with. I know for me in high school it was really, really difficult. I was it was really difficult just in the sense that a lot of people would just call me like this conservative Black woman, in the sense that I thought it was a negative connotation,
Of
that it
course.
was somebody calling me something that I was like a slur equivalent to something worse. And to be called that in a world where a Black liberal woman is, the standard, it's
Mm.
really hard. It makes me feel as if I'm just like not Black at all, even though look at me, I am. So there's not really one way to be Black. And that's something that I've tried to emphasize over the years, meeting with youth, but it's just really difficult when you have this such a big echo chamber and you have all of these things being said about what it's like to be Black, what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be both of those things at the same time. And conservatism just does not fit in that. And it's so difficult, especially when I would try to have conversations with people, I would be met with complete hostility. Like I had maybe a month being in the Washington NAACP Youth Council before people hated me. And it's mostly because, when I came into the NAACP Youth Council, I was really charged up. I was fired up in the sense that I really wanted to change things. I was in my like kind of transition of thinking about how do we, make sure that we make decisions as leaders that are, not having unintended consequences for the people we're trying to help, specifically marginalized communities, specifically the Black community for me. And so when I saw the kind of things that we were trying to implement as a youth council, I was like, this isn't doing anything. This is doing nothing. Like there's a distinction between performative activism and there's reformative activism. And for me, I think a lot of the things we were doing is just symbolic and it means nothing. And you can say all these things like, yes, we emphasize, students who are furthest from educational justice. Okay, but what the hell does that mean? Sorry, but
Mm.
like, what does that mean?
Well, jargon.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of virtue signaling, and in Seattle Public Schools, especially the principals there, they do a really good job at virtue signaling. I will give them that because I've had conversations, especially with the previous principal, Roosevelt, the school I went to, it's very unstable. They've had like 3 or 4 principals in the time that I left. So 4 principals ago, the white principal, she had a very good job of like, she could tell the lingo. She knew what to say to keep white rich parents happy and Black poor parents happy. And so she's like, oh, I'll work on that. Oh, I'll work on that. And it really is so difficult because it's this kind of, I guess you could call it a race dance in a way where you're
Mm,
trying to play both sides. And you're really in a predominantly white school where it's mostly rich parents who have the sway. It's mostly about performative activism for the black parents and reformative for the white parents. And it's really just a balancing of the scales, and it always just goes one way.
oh, that's really well put. Yeah, I think so. I think that that's extremely accurate. Um, so what is it like? Like, is this more political than anything really about race? And the reason I bring that up is I had Dr. Sheena Mason on my podcast, who's awesome, and she has the theory of racelessness, and she's a professor at Howard and stuff like that. And she I believe that's where she was at, but anyway, I was talking to her because she's like, she talks about she's racialized as black. She doesn't like the concept of race. She said the way to fight racism is to just not talk about race, and it kind of makes sense considering like most of my friends are in biracial relationships and their kids are mutts. Like my kids are mutts. You know what I mean? Like, and I mean I say mutt lovingly, like I love my kids, but like they're they're just mixed, and we're all going to be some goofy shade in the future. So
Mhm.
this concept of like race is gonna get muddled regardless, and good. But one of the things I said is like, well, it's easy for you, she's a lesbian, she's black, all this kind of stuff. And she's like, no, because I am the opposite. I'm like cis, white, heterosexual, like over 6 feet tall. I'm like, I'm all those, like I'm like the oppressor on the oppressor oppressed matrix. I'm like the ultimate oppressor. Like my 23 and me, Leah, is horrifying. I'm like 99.9% German. It's like,
Colonizer.
yeah, it's gnarly. So I like, of course, I will get attacked. Like I get attacked all the time. Like, oh, you're just coming from a white man, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but you get away with it. And she's like, oh no. She's like, because I am a traitor on top of all that stuff. So it's actually worse. So like if a white boy was saying this stuff that in high school, it's easier to dismiss him as just being a racist, male, whatever it is. But when you say it, it probably builds up almost more vitriol because they have to contend with your identity markers if they're playing the identity marker game. So how
Mhm.
much of that is just politics then? Like it's not really about race or sexuality or gender. It's about the politics and being left politics. And I'm left on a lot of things personally, but like it seems like a lot of these social justice movements just are politics of the left, matter more than your identity markers even.
Mhm. Well, I think even within that, especially being at the University of Washington, it's about the culture that cultivates in predominantly, liberal academic spaces.
Mhm.
For me, when I talk in the classroom as like a Black woman who spouts conservative things, it's about, okay, when they hear me saying these things, they're like confused in a way because
Yeah.
this is something that you would hear from somebody who looks like you, somebody who's
Yeah.
white, a male, and they're hearing it from my mouth and they immediately want to call me racist because that's the initial reaction, because once
Yeah.
you say that, especially in this kind of era of cancel culture, that's really it. How do you respond to that as a white male? As a
Yeah.
Black woman, how are you going to call me racist? It's definitely possible for me to be racist, absolutely, but in your liberal definition of what racism is, it doesn't fit that. So how do
Right.
you refute that? And for me, it's actually sparked a lot more conversation, and they're actually more attentive to what I want to say and what they want to when they want to have a conversation with me, especially since I have a lot of white professors. A lot of times when they say stuff, especially I'm a political science major, so we talk about concepts of individualism, social welfare, all these different things. I'm more of an individualist, so when I say these types of things, they're like, "Well, why do you think that?" Blah blah blah, and you can see the kind of confusion, but also curiosity at the same time. And I personally love that. I love how
Mhm.
politics, identity, all these different things come into play, and that's one of the things that I actually really love about my identity as somebody who, talks about conservatism, talks about liberalism, and all these different aspects. I think that it's just something that brings something so unique to a space. Personally, I would love to see, more Black conservative women speaking out, talking about these different things. Maybe not a Candace Owens personally, but
Yeah.
um all these different things. I think it's just really important to bring some type of diversity to the space, not just in skin color, but also in experience and diversity of thought.
Yeah, you mentioned Candace Owens. I think she is the go-to. She's kind of put herself in that category as like she is the like the symbol for like a black conservative woman. But the issue I have with Candace Owens that I've called out publicly is her approach. I don't think it's her ideas. I think she's a very astute woman. I think she's really brilliant. I think she's great at marketing and kind of playing the media game. Who she calls out the Kardashians. She calls, she's like able to like grab onto these people and piggyback on their success. But her approach is often very harsh and cold, and it doesn't sound loving. And it kind of like taps into that thing that a lot of conservatives have, which is just like, I'm just speaking truth. I'm just speaking truth, bro. Like the truth, if the truth hurts and go, it's like, well, hold on. Like, no. Like, that's not like, you get sensitive about stuff. Like, can I just wipe my butt with the American flag? Like, you're not going to like that. So like, let's round our edges a little bit and recognize that we all have our sensitivities. And that whole idea of just like saying like the harsh truth and not just the truth through like extending also like grace and curiosity and humility. I think that's my biggest issue with her. And I think that conservatives need to have more heart. I think that's what they're lacking. And then the conservative movement is lacking in their PR of being kind. And like if you believe that conservative ideas will help marginalized communities, which I think there's good arguments for that, then you need to sound like you care about marginalized communities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So it's so funny because I used to actually watch Candace Owens and listen to her like so much. And it was to the point where I was like a mini Candace Owens. And I hate to coin it as that, but I was somebody, especially during my NAACP days, and this is something where I've had more humility around, is recognizing, my faults. A lot of the times it can seem like, oh, it was all these staunch liberals who were against me and these ideals, but really it's a combination on both sides of a lack of understanding and empathy. And, for me, I was definitely like, facts, don't care about your feelings, all these different things, blah, blah, blah. And over the years, I've also transitioned into a person who was like, okay, when we're talking about racism, when we're talking about sexism, all these different things, this shit is tough. Like literally, it's so hard. And it's so hard to think about people who aren't accepted for who they are and all these different things. And so when I try and approach things with a conversation, I think about, not only the other person's experiences that I don't know about or do know about, but also try and think about how can I navigate this situation in a way that gets my point across, but does not bully the other person.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm trying to balance, because I can sound like a bully sometimes, because sometimes I'm like, hey, I'm right. This logic flows. So it's definitely difficult.
Yeah, but if you're trying to win people to your side, I mean, this kind of applies because I'm kind of new to faith, and through that process, I watched the way a lot of Christians treat other people. And if your goal is to try and bring people to faith, like, why are you taking joy in their struggling? Why are you ridiculing them for having crazy ideas? Like, it doesn't seem like a good way to recruit. Like, if you're recruiting for a job, like, you don't make fun of the people. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I think that's a real problem, because it's like the left has a monopoly on kind people. So if you're just like, if you're lost, you don't know where to go. Like, what do I do? What political party should I join? I think that's why a lot of young people go to the left, is just like, well, nice people go here, so I'll go with the nice people. Like, I want to feel like a nice person. Like, that's a really important thing that I think we need to change. The younger generation, your generation of conservatives, needs to do that. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's really important. And, in this day and age where you have like the left, the right, and people strongly identify with either. And like you said, you have people who, have these different things that we associate with each party. We have individualists on this side, we have social welfare on this side, we have nice people, we have mean people. It's this dichotomy that makes it so difficult. And sometimes it just makes it easier for people to just be like, okay, I'm over here. I see a D next to this person's name, I'll vote for them. I see an R. It's really it. It's too simple for the way that we have such a spectrum of thought. Personally, it's also why I'm an independent. I'll vote for whoever I want to, regardless of the D or R next to their name. So. Fist bump.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. Go where the best ideas are, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask Leah, like, your former teacher that kind of started you down this road is who introduced us, and he's in an educators group that I'm in, and he's awesome. I don't know if I was gonna keep talking about his name because I don't want to get in trouble I don't want him to get in trouble for helping young minds to critically think. Because
Hmm.
he might get in trouble for helping young people to think critically. How crazy is this world that we're in? This is nuts. So what are we doing? Can you tell us, like, the moment? Did you have like a moment where the snowball started, where the avalanche started for you? And was it an activity in class? Was it a personal relationship that you had? Like, what was it that started you down this road of becoming a more robust thinker and not just stuck in an ideological camp?
Mm. I would say like being in the Black Student Union, I started off just as a member. I went up to being a vice president, then president in my like junior year.
Was he involved in
And
that?
he was, but only because I was a student. There he
Oh,
had
okay.
very few students. And I was one of the few that were Black in his class, and part of the Black Student Union.
Was he one of the only Black teachers in their school?
He was one of three, I
Okay.
believe.
Yeah, well, that's
Yes.
not a lot.
That's
Yeah,
one of the reasons that they did not fire him is for diversity reasons. And I think it's really funny every time I mention that.
probably true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because
um
he's a Black man. Okay. So okay. I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah, so one of the things that was really pivotal is I was trying my hardest to recruit these sophomore and freshman young Black women into the Black Student Union, because one thing I realized is when you're part of, youth groups, you need somebody to continue it on, and you need somebody to continue it on properly. So properly in the sense that I wanted to mentor them, but I also wanted to learn more from them as well. I think that was really important. One thing that was difficult is that they were extremely radical. They were as radical as I was in my freshman year, and to be honest, that is really annoying. um, a lot of the times, and it's really difficult to kind of put into words, but when you are predominantly in a predominantly white space, especially in academia, in a high school, um, it's easy to look for racism in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's just it's you kind of just look for me, I was looking for it from the perspective like my brothers had experienced racism at Roosevelt, the high school I went to, and I was just waiting for it on a platter to be served to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of changes your perspective on what you're expecting and how you view things and how you view interactions, especially with, the people around you. You're constantly, surrounded by white people. So how does that
Yeah.
affect your, kind of interactions with them? And so for me, it kind of like that mentality kind of makes it so it's difficult to have interactions with, teachers of color. For example, the youth that I was trying to recruit into the Black Student Union, they had an interaction with the vice principal of Roosevelt, where she said, colored students, I was not there. Let me just preface this. I was not there. She's a woman of color. She said colored students. Was not there to witness if she actually said this.
Okay.
And those students, they wanted to just reprimand her. Like in the same way I was ostracized later on in my life, they wanted to ostracize her. One thing that is important to note is that there's predominantly white students here, and there's also the predominantly white staff. So the same situation I was in, the same situation that woman was in for the vice principal. So those students wanted to completely ostracize this vice principal. And she was essentially saying, she said colored students, but she also told them to get back to class because they are students who constantly skip class and would not go back. And that's something that they unfortunately left out of their story when they were telling me that I had to find out myself. And so in this conversation with them, I'm talking about, okay, let's kind of think through this. I wasn't there, but we also need to think about the fact that, this vice principal is in the same situation that we are in. Predominantly white space, predominantly white people, predominantly white ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, she's isolated, we felt isolated, our anger, our kind of like feelings should not be directed towards somebody who's already experiencing the same thing as us. quite honestly, it's difficult. And it's hard not to kind of like direct that energy toward her in that moment. But this is also something that they failed to understand what I was trying to say in that moment, that we're in this together, quote unquote, Hakuna
Yeah.
Matata. And they just failed to understand that. And so that was one of like defining moments where I realized like, okay, if we're not in this together, then what the hell are we doing?
It's a union, right? Or is that what?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean that's
Uh-huh. Exactly. And Black Student Union, for me, it was also about helping staff. You know, we need more teachers of color, and we need those teachers of color to stick together beside our students of color. It's
right.
really just it's simple thought process. And that's something that when, somebody spouts something that is, not with the lingo, not with the political correctness, you immediately ostracize them even when they are trying to help you. And in this case, go back to class, learn something, because the achievement gap is quite real. And I even told these students this, like, you need to be in class. And they hated me for it. And like I said, it always comes with some kind of social cost as well.
Yeah, well, you can be, I mean, rebellious teenagers are going to be rebellious teenagers, but if
Mm-hmm.
you have a way out of that to say, to make it so you're actually virtuous to be a rebellious teenager because you're fighting the oppression of the patriarchy or white supremacy, well, now you're just being, I know what you're doing. You're just being a teenager. Like you're a teenager. You're looking for a
Mm-hmm.
way to get out of class. I get it. Props, but no. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be good for you. And
Mm-hmm.
part of the job of an educator is to say, this is going to be good for you. You don't maybe understand it yet, but your job as a teenager is to kind of like push the boundaries and to say like, I'm an adult. I'm not a kid anymore. And you're not an adult yet. You're not a child anymore, but you're not an adult yet. You're kind of in the middle. You're in that transition. And my job is to try and guide you through that. And part of that is to say like, no, like this rebellion, there's good rebellion, there's bad rebellion, but this rebellion is going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And standing up for injustice, that's wonderful rebellion. Martin
Mm-hmm.
Luther King was arrested 29 times. That's beautiful rebellion. Probably didn't feel good for him at the time, but we look back on that fondly. But that's different because this is rebellion just for the sake of rebellion is very different than rebellion with a very clear cause of how this will benefit me, my people, America in general as a whole. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something about like your brother experienced racism. Some of the like it's very possible and very reasonable. I mean, as gross as being racist toward people is reasonable in that in a white school, being black will be different. And bullying, and I've been in the classroom for 17 years. I watch bullying. Bullying is a lot of just what makes you stand out. If you're a white kid going to an all black school, you don't think you're gonna get made fun of for your skin color? Of course. And if you're in an all black school, you're gonna get made fun of for the way your ears sit off on your head, or the kind of shoes you have, or because your teeth are a little crooked, or because your teeth are too big or too small. Like that's part of it. It's just you look for something that makes you stand out. And that's what kids latch onto. So it's not that unreasonable that in a white school that your brother might experience racism. The question is whether or not that is actual like deep-seated understanding of racism, or if it's just teenagers being jerks,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to get a rise out of saying something that they know is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Teenagers do that, especially teenage boys. But teenage boys, I think especially, will say things that are horrible just to test the boundaries, like the raptors in Jurassic Park, just to see like how crazy, what happens if I say this crazy stuff? Like really, like in the world, they're trying to figure out the world. So I don't know. It's hard to separate, like, is that actual racism and like you think these things, or is it something that's just less powerful in a way of their intention of it's just ugliness for the sake of ugliness sake. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I have had like numerous conversations about this. Where does it stem from? Because eventually, we realized as a Black Student Union, like, okay, white boys are just saying this just to say this at some point. They're
Uh,
like, at some point, they're like, why is your skin so dark, bro? I'm like, I've literally had some white boy come up to me and do that. So, at some point, it's just like you're just messing with me. And this, you just think this is funny. And to a certain extent, I laughed a little bit because I thought it was fucking ridiculous. But it's stupid. And
yeah, I
so
mean, also, I
it's
mean, just
so
aesthetically, I'm sorry, but also aesthetically is like for people, like you're not like would you consider yourself like dark skinned? Like, I don't know. I don't know how that even.
For me, I think I'm like in the middle of dark skin and brown skin. Like, I don't think I'm
Yeah.
the darkest person ever. Like,
Yeah. Like I have
so,
friends who are, yeah,
mhm,
I have friends who are very dark skinned. And it's like one of
mhm,
those things that I get why someone might be like, wow, why you have such like, oh, well, because I'm of African descent or something like
mhm,
that. You know, well, I was born and raised in Uganda, like, you know, or something along those lines.
mhm,
So when someone says that to you, like, yeah, I think you're right. I think it might just be teenage
mhm,
boys just being jerks and trying to like
mhm.
flirt in in a weird way, probably.
To a certain extent, it's also about, the kind of culture that cultivates in a predominantly white space, and,
Mm,
just in
yeah.
general, like a homogenous space. When you're all
Mhm.
around, like, let's say I'm in a group of just Black women, the type of conversation that I'm going to have with, majority Black women in a room is completely different than the one that I would have, in a predominantly white one. It's just different.
Mhm.
People are more careful with their words. People kind of say things in the way they think about things differently. And that's kind of what the inherent value of diversity in the classroom and in a school is. When you have, people who look different from you, and when you're talking about, let's say, like MLK or something like that, you speak differently. You
Yeah.
don't like sit like slouched in a classroom. You are sitting differently in all of these different things. And so one thing that I realize, when we have teenage boys who just say stuff just to say stuff, just make the classrooms more diverse. That's all I've got.
Yeah.
And it's really just about having Black students, white students, Asian students all interacting with each other. And eventually, it's just about making those race jokes together. That's really what it is for me. I'd love to have that joke with somebody in a diverse classroom than having it be just directly at me, if that
Yeah.
makes more sense.
Oh yeah, my friends. I was never served in the military. My friends in the military, like they're brutal to each other. Like when it comes like
Mhm,
racist stuff and derogatory stuff, like back and forth. Because it's such a brotherhood. They're so in this together. It's such a
mhm,
camaraderie that like yeah, you're best friends. Like you make fun of them all the time. You know, like that's just like that's something that you do. Um, so uh, part of what this show is cylinder radio, so it's all about viewpoint diversity and stuff like that. And I really think a valuable exercise I try and ask my guests is to steel man the positions that are kind of opposing of theirs. So if you could, because you know kind of the mentality because you were there and you were younger but you were there, can you like give the best kind of justification for people that are in that, I guess, woke, is that like the right term? I guess we kind of all know what we're saying when we say woke. So can you like kind of steel man that position and try to articulate like the positives and the not just positive but also like the legitimacy of that position, like to the best you can, even though you kind of like don't have that anymore. But I think that there's something really
mhm,
valuable for listeners who are, and I do have people that listen to the podcast and follow my stuff who disagree with me and are essentially like woke. And I think that it's important. Part of why they do is because I don't vilify them even when I disagree, and I say like I try my best to like represent their position best I
mhm,
can so they at least feel heard even when I disagree. But you might be able to do that in a way that I can. I try a lot, but can you
mhm.
try to like steelman that kind of woke, social justice, white supremacy everywhere type of mentality?
Mhm. Well, one of the things, like, when I was, in my freshman, sophomore year, and I was such a, radical liberal, I had this certain framework, this certain lens that I applied to every single little thing I saw. And for me, it was about analyzing the system, analyzing the people, and the interactions that I have, and looking for inequities within that. And for me, I think that's really beneficial in a way because you are centering those who have been, marginalized throughout history and all of these different things, who have experienced so much systemic racism in a way. And quite honestly, it can be really, really beneficial to center those people. One of the things that Seattle Public Schools does, it centers, specifically Black males who are young, and who statistically, are, forced into this school to prison pipeline, have lower achievement rates and all of these different things. And you're centering them in a way that you are working towards building up that population in a way that they can have social mobility, they can gain the same types of things that others are, inherently have. And so there's definitely a benefit to that lens. And it's something that's really unique to liberalism. It provided me, starting off from being, so socially liberal to being a little bit more conservative in a way. It provided me with this lens where I'm thinking about things in an equity way. How can I think about, the history of things and, what people have experienced and apply that here, but also in a pragmatic way. Um, One of the kind of issues with that is, the effect it has on Black minds. Specifically for me, it's about the coddling of Black kids. You think about all of these different things, you kind of sugarcoat things for, Black students, more specifically in Roosevelt, the high school I went to. Whenever you would call out, racism, or I would call out racism as a very, very liberal person, you have to think of the social cost that is associated that, especially when you're talking about white staff, for example, who may be treating their students differently. So when you have racism that is a bit more subtle, and that liberals tend to call out, and racism that is very prevalent, you want to make the distinction between that. And so when I would call out racism, it would kind of have a social cost in the way that, white teachers wouldn't want to interact with Black students. And would see this in the way that, Black students would be out in the hallways. White teachers would not be the ones to tell them back to go back to the classroom because, there's a negative connotation with that. We're like, hey, I don't want to be called racist, so I don't want to, interact with Black students at all. So it has this negative net effect that is really difficult to combat, but also can be resolved through the equity lens again. And it's kind of full circle in a way. This is why I kind of think that both sides really come into play. That pragmatic side of things where you're thinking about, okay, what is racism? How do we define it? What are the parameters of it? When do we call out racism in a way? And so, liberalism has so many benefits to, equity lens, thinking about race critically, but also so does conservatism. And it's really difficult because it's so many different parameters around that.
Yeah, that's the way I try to teach is I say like it's the progressives that are pushing ideas like forward, and some of them are excellent and some of them are wacky, and like and they push all these ideas, and then the conservatives are kind of by definition they want to conserve. They're not the ones out there trying new things. They're looking at to the past, but they're like the doorman. Like that bad idea, that's a good idea. Come on in, but it's almost like Martin Luther King. You can come in, Stokely Carmichael. No, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like play is how they work together. Now, I don't like all this polarization. Republicans are evil or whatever it is, because like, no, you actually need them because you don't want just like AOC policies going through, but you also don't want whatever, whoever is on the, Marjorie Taylor Greene policies going through, because her ideas are going to be antiquated to a point where we're not going to be able to advance. We're not going to be able to progress kind of by definition. So that dance and that back and forth is what we absolutely need. So instead of looking at them like they're your enemy, instead look at them like, oh, you're the yin to my yang. And that's how this should work. And I think that's the only way that we can advance forward. That's why this political polarization stuff drives me nuts. Yeah. Leah, you give me a lot of hope for the future as a young mind. Like you've got it kind of going on, regardless of where you stand politically. The fact that you are such a critical thinker and you're willing to stand up for the things that you believed in, despite the social pressures and stuff like that is awesome. It's really, really awesome. It's a testament to yourself. It's a testament to Tola, the educator that connected us. I'm sure your family, like whatever it is that made you the kind of person that you are, that you're willing to stand up for this stuff and speak your mind, and then hit the books and like do like the necessary kind of grind stuff, not the armchair activism stuff. It gives me hope because I'm worried about the future. Do you do anything like as far as like we're doing a podcast here, so do you have like social media or anything like that? Are you going down those worlds to try and scale what you do? Because that's what took me onto social media is I was doing this stuff in my classroom, and then my wife was like, you should put it online. And I always felt weird talking to my phone, running a podcast. I'm not really like polished in that way, but I was like, look, if I actually want to bring about change, it has to be beyond my 4 classes of 25 students. It has to go beyond that. I have to scale using tech channels. So have
Mhm.
you thought about that yet? Like, you're going to be a youth advocate. Are you going to scale that using the tech channels? And if so, where can we keep up with your work as it develops?
I've definitely thought about, having some type of social media that is just, really focused on, the work that I want to do in terms of, helping youth build critical thinking skills and all these different things. It's just that I haven't done it just because of that social cost.
Mm.
I'm 19, so it's just too much for somebody who's just so young and wants to make friends in university.
Yeah.
um, so for me, I haven't created anything. I've definitely wanted to start a podcast before. I don't know if you could tell by my setup.
It's good. Yeah, I
But
like the
yeah.
ears on the headphones. That's awesome.
I was wondering when you were gonna comment on it. I was
Yeah,
waiting. I was
it's
like,
coming.
nobody ever just not comments on it, you know?
Oh, they're great.
But
I
in
gotta
terms
get a
of
pair for
social
myself.
media, no.
Yeah. So maybe in the future.
Mhm.
Okay, but right now it's kind of a down. Well, this is gonna go out, so maybe you'll get caught. Um, Leah Scott, thank you so much for coming on here. I'm glad we got to record this, and I hope it kind of allows some other people who are listening to be like, she sounds kind of astute. Maybe there's something to this, or at the very least, like, all right, I'm going to question things more because that's
Mhm.
the pathway to, if you really care about helping marginalized communities, if you really do, and I believe a lot of people do, then you gotta overturn all the rocks, and it can't just be stuck in one kind of camp. You gotta really do difficult work, which means get to class on time. Read the books, read all the books, because it's gonna be a lot of different viewpoints that are gonna get us towards a good solution. So, Leah Scott, thank you for taking your afternoon after work and school and everything to come here and have this conversation with me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
If you enjoy these kinds of complex conversations and want to try to apply them in your own life, check out my free download, Debate to Dialogue, a guide on having productive conversations on religion and politics. It's available at www.cylinderradio.com/debate to dialogue.